Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a 2,000-year-old legal debate, a debate from the Talmud, of all places, that gets at a question that feels incredibly modern. What does it actually mean to do something? I mean, it sounds simple, right? What defines an action? But think about it for a second. Is it the whole process, the journey from start to finish? Or is it only that final moment, the result, the destination? This is a huge puzzle, one that philosophers and lawyers have been chewing on for literally centuries. So we're going to explore these two totally different ways of looking at things. You've got one side that says an action is this continuous flow, the whole process. And then the other side says, nope, nothing really happens, legally speaking, until that very last second. And that tension, well, that's the heart of our entire investigation today. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll look at the big question, dive into the core dispute, and then step into a legal laboratory to see how these ideas hold up. After that, we'll tackle something called the Passover puzzle, and finally, we'll talk about why any of this still matters. Okay, let's get right into it with the core dispute. We're jumping into a really intense debate from the Talmud, all about the precise definition of Shechita, that's Jewish ritual slaughter. And it turns out this becomes the perfect high-stakes testing ground for this huge question about what an action even is. And at the center of this, you have two brilliant scholars who staked out these totally opposite positions. We can call them team process, which is Rabbi Yoḥanan's side, and team outcome, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish's. It's really that simple. One guy sees the action in every single step, and the other says it's only about the final result. So Rabbi Yoḥanan's view, this is probably the one that feels most natural to us, right? He's basically saying the action exists across time. From the very first moment the knife makes contact to the very last, it's all just one continuous act. The whole journey is what counts. But then you have Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and for him, nope, it's all about the destination. And he makes this really bold claim. He says that legally, nothing has actually happened until the act is 100% complete. Only that final concluding moment defines reality. Everything that came before, you could say it's just potential. So, who's right? This is where it gets really cool. We're heading into what I'm calling the legal laboratory. See, the Talmud doesn't just leave this as some abstract philosophical argument. No way. It actually runs these two theories through a bunch of clever thought experiments to really stress test them, to see which one holds up. Okay, let's check out the first test case. This one involves the sacred space of the Jerusalem temple. Now, the rule is a sacrificial animal can only be slaughtered inside the temple courtyard. So, picture this. A priest starts the cut outside the courtyard, which is totally forbidden. But then, before he's done, he moves the animal and makes the final cut inside, in the correct place. So, the big question is the priest on the hook for this? Did he technically perform a sacred act in the wrong place? Well, the answer depends completely on which team you're on, team process or team outcome. And this just perfectly shows the divide, doesn't it? For team process, Rabbi Yoḥanan, the answer is yes, he's liable. The action started in a forbidden place, so the whole thing is tainted. The process itself is the crime. But for team outcome, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish would say, nope, not liable, because the action was concluded inside, in the right spot. The legal ending basically just erases the illegal beginning. All right, the next test case gets even weirder. It involves one of the most mysterious rituals in the entire Bible, the Red Heifer. And the rule you need to know is kind of a paradox. Anyone involved in this super pure ceremony actually becomes ritually impure themselves. But, and this is the key part, that only happens if the rite is performed absolutely perfectly. Any mistake, any flaw, and the whole thing is off. The spell is broken. Now, this scenario poses a really interesting problem for team process. The question becomes, hey, if the slaughter is a continuous process, and let's say the heifer gets disqualified halfway through, shouldn't the people who were part of the process before the mistake happened, shouldn't they still become impure? It's a great question, but the rebuttal is just as clever. A flawed slaughter is different. The error basically works retroactively. It's like it goes back in time and says, you know what, this was never a valid slaughter to begin with. Okay, that brings us to our final and maybe most complex challenge, the Passover puzzle. This is the one that really puts team outcome, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish's theory, under some serious pressure.
So first, we just need a little background on the Passover offering. There are some really strict rules. It has to be done in a very specific time window. If you do it at the wrong time, like during the Passover festival itself, the offering is totally disqualified. On top of that, there's another major prohibition. You're not allowed to slaughter any offering while you have leavened bread in your possession during Passover.
All right, so here's the puzzle. Imagine someone slaughters a Passover offering, but they do it at the wrong time, during the festival. And at that same moment, they also have forbidden leavened bread. Now, on the surface, it looks like they've broken that second rule, right? But the Talmud says they're actually exempt from punishment. The question is, why the heck not? For team process, the answer here is pretty straightforward. Rabbi Yoḥanan would say, look, the offering was disqualified from the very first cut because the timing was wrong. That means a valid sacred act never even started. So you can't be punished for slaughtering a valid sacrifice while having leavened bread because you never actually slaughtered a valid sacrifice. Easy peasy.
But for team outcome, this is a huge headache. Remember, for Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, nothing legally happens until the final moment. So, if that's true, the animal should have been a perfectly valid offering right up until that last cut. And if that's the case, then the person should be liable. The solution he comes up with is brilliant, though. He argues that the animal keeps its Passover status right up until the act is fully complete. So even though it can't be a proper sacrifice because of the bad timing, its fundamental identity is still Passover offering. It's a disqualified Passover offering all the way through, and that's the loophole. So after all that, that's some pretty deep and complex reasoning, right? We finally get to the big question. Why does any of this matter? Why are we talking about this ancient debate today? Well, because it was never really just about ritual slaughter. This whole thing, it's really a framework for thinking about legal and moral responsibility. Think about it. When does an attempt to do something become the completed act? When does a bad choice cross the line into a crime? Is it about the intent, the process, or just the final outcome? This debate shows how hard people have worked to find real precision in law and in ethics. And that idea of retroactive disqualification is so powerful. It tells us that sometimes the end of the story can actually rewrite the beginning. The final outcome can reach back in time and completely change what we thought was happening all along. Something that looked like a valid act can suddenly be revealed as, something that was never really valid at all. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to take with us, doesn't it? In our own lives, when does a choice become an irreversible act? Is it the moment we start down a path, or is it only when we see that final outcome? This 2,000-year-old debate, it turns out, is a question we all kind of have to answer for ourselves. Thanks for joining us.